Hello, I am joined by Josh Warren, product expert and Stoke ambassador.
That's right.
From WorkSharp. And as you can see, we have an assortment of knives. We're going to talk about knife sharpening. Now that you can find 101 different videos on how to sharpen a knife, and we'll go over some of that, but what we want to do with Josh's help is talk about some considerations about the when, the why of sharpening a knife, and what you should know based on the knife you're planning to sharpen. Here's what Josh is going to walk us through in this video. He's going to tell us when you want to sharpen your blade, and also what considerations to take into account around your blade and your abrasives. Right?
You got it?
Cool. First off, Josh, we got to know when you sharpen your blade.
If you're new to sharpening, you're going to want to assess the blade that is on your knife as is. So some of the ways you can do that are you can do a fingernail test. So sounds a little scary, but it's not. So if you set the blade on your fingernail and push forward, if it doesn't catch, odds are you're going to need to sharpen it.
Okay.
If it does catch, you want to test a couple of different points on the blade, and then likely all you're going to need to do is touch that up with honing or stropping, and we'll get into those later.
Okay, let's get rolling. Tell me about blade angles.
Your blade angles are going to range anywhere from a straight razor, something like 10 degrees, very fine, all the way up to a machete, maybe 35 or 40 degrees, a hard-working blade. The reason that a straight razor has such a fine angle is because it's not working very hard against hard materials. All it's doing is touching some skin and some hair. So that fine angle will hold up for a long time. Whereas if you put that same angle on a machete, the first time you swipe through a branch, it's gonna bend and get chipped and beat up really fast. So you have to know the angle that you want on your knife. Most knives come with a traditional angle meant for the type of knife that they are. Kitchen knives are gonna have anywhere from a 17 degree to a 22 degree angle. And outdoor knives are gonna have probably from a 20 to a 30 degree angle if you're using it around the campsite. So understanding what edge you want on your knife is going to be key to sharpening that.
Our key takeaways are:
every knife has an angle set at the manufacturer. Usually you want to stick to that angle, but it is a preference. So again, straight razors, 10 to 12 degrees, outdoor knives, 20 to 30 degrees, kitchen knives are going to be 17 to 22, and maybe an outdoor knife like a machete is up to 40 degrees.
And your broadsword. Josh, what about knife steel?
The most important thing with knife steel is to understand what you're working with so that you can sharpen correctly. Steels range from softer or less tough steels. Some of the older classics are going to be 440, 420, and that's just going to be a little bit softer than some of the new super steels that you might hear about, S30, S35, or even S90V. Most important thing is to know your steel so that you can know how to sharpen. GearJunkie has a great article, we'll link it down below, about what steel your knife is and what that means for the corrosion resistance, the toughness, or I guess how well it's going to hold its shape, and then the hardness. Is it brittle? Or is it really soft?
We've talked angles, we've talked steels. Now we also have to know blade shape.
Yep, lots of different blade shapes out there. Some of the most common ones are like a drop point, where the back comes down. But really, the thing that matters about this is that it's one solid line. It's gonna go straight, and then your blade curves up. Relatively easy to sharpen. As you drag that across a stone or abrasive, you can kind of just push in one motion. Some of the others are the Tonto blade, and this is where you actually have two different individual blades. You have a main blade, sometimes it's flat, sometimes it has a little bit of a curve, and then you have a secondary small blade. These are used in a lot of tactical applications, so not super common in the outdoor world, but they're out there. Basically, you want to know that as you sharpen this, you treat it as two separate blades. Sharpen here, sharpen here. Another common blade is serrations, or a mixed blade. So you have serrations at the heel, and then you have just a standard curve at the tip of the blade. We'll go over how to sharpen serrations in a little bit, but essentially as you're sharpening the primary portion of the blade, all you want to do is focus there, and you won't touch the serrations until a little bit later.
So you've done the thumb test and determined it's time to sharpen your knife. You know your blade's steel. Josh, what are we doing with that information?
So that's going to tell you where to start with the abrasive and what you're sharpening. So if your knife is inconsistent, as you run it along, maybe it's sharp some places, not sharp in others, you're going to need to reset basically that whole edge to make it consistent. So I would start with a very coarse grit, a 120 or 220 grit on the belt system, or a coarse diamond stone if you're sharpening manually. If you have any damage on your knife, if there's any chips out of it, then you're also going to need to use a coarse or even extra coarse. That 120 is going to be the belt you're looking for to get that chip to go away. Essentially, you've got to remove enough material around that to hide that and to get your blade to be consistent again. Also, if you have a harder steel, something, this knife is a S30V, it takes a little bit of abrasion to remove enough metal to get it sharp.
So to reiterate, if I'm understanding this correctly, we're talking about inconsistencies in the blade, damage to the blade, a hard steel on the blade, or obviously if it's your first time sharpening this knife or you haven't sharpened it in years after heavy use, you're gonna go with a coarse grit belt.
You got it.
All right, let's sharpen something. What are we working with?
All right, this is the Ken Onion Edition knife and tool sharpener, and then we've got the blade grinding attachment on there. So we call it our elite sharpener. Essentially, this thing gives you a lot of options as far as angle goes, speed of sharpening, and gives you some premium belts, abrasives to work with. So first thing I'm gonna do is set the angle for the knife we're gonna sharpen. We're gonna sharpen this guy. This is more of a outdoor knife, something that you carry in your pocket, used open boxes, and then if you're going camping, you might bring something like this. I tested on my thumb, thing's pretty dull. It's not catching my finger whatsoever. So we're gonna go with 25 degrees, set that angle, and then I'm tightening a screw on the back. And that angle is changing the distance or the angle of those two pulleys. So that's where we'll be doing our sharpening work. I'm gonna use this platform right here, and that's my 0 reference. Every time I bring the knife down, I'm giving myself some feedback. So I can tell if I'm off, left or right, front or back. Good reference point. What I'm gonna do is turn the machine on. We got a medium-low speed, and I've got a 220 belt on there. That's a coarse belt, but not an extra coarse. This is not a super hard steel, so it should sharpen relatively easily. So we'll rest it there, and then I'm gonna bring it up to the belt, light tension or light pressure on there. I'm gonna follow the shape of the blade around, and I'm gonna stop when the tip is halfway on the belt. That way we don't round this tip by having the belt curve over that. Bring it up, set it on, all the way across, and we're moving with it. And with one pass, we're almost at a burr, not quite. So what that burr is doing is showing us that we've brought the two sides of the knife all the way together, and we've actually started folding one end over the other. So that just means dull has a flat spot. As we sharpen, we're bringing those together, and that burr signals to us that they have come all the way together. We're not quite there. I think we're close. You wanna give it a try?
Yes, I want to try this. Now, to show that you do not have to be an expert to sharpen your blade, and because I've been paying attention this whole time, I'm gonna give this a spin.
Very nice.
Ooh, what's happening? How'd I do?
Yeah, that looks good. I'll check for a burr by running my finger across the blade in a safe way. So I'm pushing out, and my finger catches just barely as I go over that tip. And that just means that it's catching that piece of metal, and I can feel it there. So you wanna make sure it's there across the whole length of the blade, and then we can step down to a even finer grit. This was a 220. I think we're gonna jump down to a 3000.
Wow, okay, cool.
So we finished on a 3000 grit, but we're gonna take it a step further with a leather strop. So this is actually not leather, this is a high density cotton belt, and we're gonna rub some compound into it. And that compound is gonna help to move that edge into an even straighter line and to make those tips just perfectly centered. First up, we're gonna rub the compound in. Just give it some pressure, rub it across the belt. You can see it working its way in. And then we're gonna strop just like we would sharpen. So we're gonna bring the knife to the belt. We're really just gonna make that edge shine. This is how I would leave the machine. So you come back to this maybe after you've used your knife a bit and you just want to touch it up. Using something like a compound strop is a great place to leave it set up. You can also use one of these if you have one, or another piece of leather where you're going to rub some compound in. This is our field sharpener, and on the back we have angle guides and a leather strop. So you rest the knife there and then you're going to draw it back across that leather strop. And we're doing the same thing in a manual fashion. Definitely what you want to do to keep that edge touched up in between uses. You could do that as much as once a week. You're not removing any material, so it's not hard on the blade. Other maintenance you can do is to use a ceramic rod. A ceramic rod or other types of rods, perhaps brass. Sometimes you have a kitchen rod, like a steel in your kitchen. You can use those to touch up your knives as well. Those are going to remove very little material or none at all. And again, what you're doing is you're using that hard rod to straighten out the knife. So something like this, which has a guide built in, you can set it there and you're going to drag it across. This knife's obviously already sharp, but this is a great piece for maintenance. That's the biggest thing to remember, is you don't need to be sharpening all the time. You're going to end up removing too much material, but you do want to make sure you're keeping that knife honed and stropped, and that's going to allow you to have a lot of life out of your knife in between sharpenings.
Earlier you referenced many different types of blades, including serrated blades. How do you sharpen those?
Let's go over it. So on a serrated blade, just like a normal blade, as you use it, the tips or the top of that blade is going to get bent over, and so you have a tip that bends one way and one that bends the other way. So really what you're doing is it is more of a maintenance piece, and you're just trying to get those tips straightened back. So to straighten the side that has the serrations cut into it, I would recommend something like a curved ceramic rod that's going to fit right inside those serrations, and you're just going to work it back and forth a little bit, and you're pushing those tips back up where they should be.
Okay.
So once you've done that across each of the serrations, you want to hone the back side of those serrations off and push them back over from the back side to make sure nothing's out there. You can also do that on a belt system and make sure that you're holding the serrations where they will not cut into the belt as it moves.
Makes sense.
Or else you will likely lose your belt. So the same way you would strop any other knife, you're going to strop the back of your serrations.
Okay.
The only difference is you want to hold that pretty flat with the belt, because as you'll notice, there's no cut edge on the other side. So we're just going to try and stay very flat as we work on those serrations. I'll usually work down a little lower and not up where the angle is set, but it's really a preference at that point. This one we can do manually as well, and so we'll just strop the back off of there. We'll check, it's real smooth. Those are pretty sharp. We're good to go.
So you're honing the serrated side, stropping the back side.
Yep.
Now we used, and you referenced, a couple different grits on the belts, but there's lots more to it.
Yeah, we offer a lot of different belts, and depending on which sharpening system you use, there's going to be a lot of different abrasives. So essentially, it's just like it's like woodworking. If you want to really mirror polish, or if you want to get all the imperfections out, you're going to work through every layer of sandpaper or grit, in this case abrasive belts. So we start with a 120 as extra coarse, and we go all the way to a 12,000. with what we have. And we skipped around a little bit. We weren't looking to read the newspaper off of our bevel, but we got close with only using a couple. So depending on how sharp and how polished you want that edge, that determines how many belts you want to work with.
So what did we learn? Blade maintenance is honing and stropping. And when it comes time to sharpen your blade, the three things you really need to pay attention to are blade steel, blade shape, and the angle of the bevel, correct?
You got it. Also remember that 90% of blade maintenance or sharpness is keeping it sharp and maintaining that edge, honing and stropping, just like you said. If you're doing that every day, leave something on your dresser, your pocket knife will stay razor sharp for a lot longer.
And everybody who's watched that's interested in these sharpening products, where can they get them?
You can head to our website, worksharptools.com. Right below, you can learn more or take one home today.
Cool. And to learn more about knife steels and everything cool in blade craft, head over to GearJunkie.com. Until next time, for Josh Warren, I'm Adam Ruggiero. We'll see you later. Bam! Woo!
Nice.
I have to piss like a racehorse.